Good evening, YouTube. Metalhead Weatherman here. It's a little bit of a late one today, kind of carried over a little bit from work and other various activities. But I'm here nonetheless, and we have a pretty impressive storm system to cover. It's a multi-day spanning event, so this video could get a little bit lengthy. We're going to touch up on everything tonight, and then I guess over the next couple of days, we'll kind of figure out where we're going from there. Mostly severe weather looks like the main threat starting out, but it's not until later in the week where the wintry side's going to kick in. So far, the severe threat isn't super robust at the moment. However, I am noticing some uptrends that could lead to these marginal risks that we're seeing right now potentially being upgraded to a slight risk. Particularly Wednesday is the one I'm looking at the most. But tomorrow's threat, Tuesday, it's becoming a little bit more impressive, especially towards the southern end of this marginal risk area, towards Corpus Christi, just to the east of San Antonio, maybe even Austin. We'll go over the parameters with that, but let's go ahead and look at the hazard types since we have them available for Tuesday. Tornado threat, there is a 2% risk. There is a 5% risk of wind. There is not a hail risk with this. General synopsis is saying that it's a positively tilted mid-level trough. And of course, whenever we say positively tilted, usually doesn't really yield to a lot of severe weather, but this does eventually start to progress into a negatively tilt, and that always increases low level flow, etc. Real question is going to be a cap. Is there a cap that's going to break? Is there going to be a cap that breaks over this region into the evening and overnight hours? I'm leaning towards yes, because the low-level jet tends to strengthen overnight. But the Cape values have started to increase now. We're kind of looking more towards 1,000 joules per kilogram, which is a much more suitable environment for severe weather than 500 joules. 500 joules is about the minimum that you would need for just a regular thunderstorm. When you get to 1,000, you're starting to really begin to lean into that severe weather criteria, so to speak. Now, the marginal risk for tomorrow is a much broader area, but I'm thinking over towards the Gulf states. I think that there could be a potential for a slight risk to develop here. Maybe even a secondary slight risk to pop up somewhere around here too. I'm actually going to try to mark these. I'm going to say one probably here, and then maybe another one somewhere around here. Pretty much would say this area, but there could be a couple other isolated pockets, like right here, for example. We'll have to see what this ends up trending towards as we move on over the next couple of days. But definitely something to keep an eye on here. So it's a pretty similar look in comparison to Tuesday. So all we have to really do is take a look at parameters and, of course, vorticity, and we'll go from there. So starting out, of course, we're using the euro since we're within range of the short range euro now. So we move this along, and I'm going to try to make sure I keep the time right here in this corner. But we'll move this forward, and here is that storm system that's positively tilted, beginning to trend towards that negative tilt as we head into the afternoon on Tuesday and into Wednesday. The lift gets a lot better on Wednesday, and the environment's much more suitable by Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon. And you can see that there's a little bit of subtle forcing right here, and that's something that we have to keep an extra close eye on. Because right here is where we would expect to see the front develop. I would say it's right about here. And then right around here, these little pockets right here. There's our warm sector, moist sector. And the forcing isn't very vigorous with this. So this is something that I would still keep an eye on, especially across northern Louisiana as we look into Wednesday in particular. Get that off the screen real quick. Still getting used to all of this. Hang on a minute. There we go. Let's roll this forward now if I can. Oh, geez. There we go. It's tricky trying to figure out how to use this stuff right now, I'm not going to lie. But I also see potential for severe threat on Thursday, excuse me, towards maybe southern Georgia, southern Alabama, just based off the vorticity map. Now, of course, a lot more than just vorticity is going to go into this, but from what I'm seeing in multiple aspects from the model, from the low-level jet, the temperatures and dew points, I think that's pointing towards an area of interest. Not entirely sold on it yet, but we'll see. But here's a look at that low-level jet, so to speak, and we'll watch this as we head into Tuesday. It's a small little area that pops up over here. Still not a very robust setup here for the coast of Texas, southeastern Texas. But as we go into Wednesday, that's when things get really interesting, especially over towards the boot heel of Louisiana. This is why this is one of many reasons why I'm concerned about that area. The shear isn't super strong at the low levels, but with the other parameters set in place, that can be worked around. And it's not like we're at 20 something knots as far as a low level jet is concerned. We're at about 30 to 40 knots. It's about the minimum you would look for, but there is something to be had there. And then as this low begins to deepen and move off to the north and east, this really starts to become more intense on that eastern side, especially that southeastern side. And right around this region here that I was talking about earlier, towards southern Georgia, southern Alabama, that's where I'm concerned about the increased threat of severe weather, maybe even a couple of tornadoes. Because one thing to note here is that low-level jet, once we get towards this sector right here, that's sitting at about 48 to 53 knots. More than sufficient enough to cause some problems here. And then as we move that forward, it lingers as we head into the afternoon on Thursday. So the timing of where that front is going to be a key determining factor. But this is definitely something that we have to keep an extra close eye on here. Now let's go ahead and go to the temperatures. This is where things kind of get interesting, especially as we look further and further towards the south. This is heading into Tuesday afternoon. We're going to mainly start out by looking over towards Texas. This is OOZ, so this is about probably 6 p.m. Central Time. Large area right here where we're sitting in the mid-60s and even some 70s. So this is getting towards sunset. That low-level jet will start to strengthen, and it'll eventually be the lifting factor that breaks that cap or forces it to lift, and storms will start to fire. When we get into the morning and afternoon hours on Wednesday, temperatures are going to be around a similar point, but there is a couple of key factors. Cloud cover in particular is going to be one of them. The more daytime, the less daytime heating we have, the more limited our severe weather could be. But if we find a way to overcome those factors, we could even see it spread as far north as Arkansas, as mentioned in the Storm Prediction Center outlook. But pretty much anywhere from Alabama to Louisiana, even parts of eastern Texas, there is a threat for severe weather. I would also say that there is a marginal tornado threat. We'll see if this gets upgraded. I think there's actually a bit of a chance here. One other thing that I'll be watching closely for is the threat of these little, I guess you would say they're coastal supercells. They'll probably form offshore, and then as they come onshore, they may find just enough friction with the land to maybe cause a quick spin up. It was a very similar look the last time we had a severe weather threat across this region. We had a few offshore supercells that worked their way onshore, and a few spin ups occurred. But as time goes on, we lose that warm sector, except towards South Georgia, and this is heading into Thursday night into Friday morning. So we'll have to watch this region Thursday for the threat of severe weather. I think we could see maybe another day or two possibly of marginal risk being issued. So that's what we have going on there. We also have to keep an eye on the wintry side of things, because Towards the middle of the week, that's when we'll start to see the snow threat start to be on the rise here. We already have our cold air somewhat set in place by Tuesday, and it's really not till I'd say Wednesday night and Thursday where things really start to unfold with that. Here's the pocket that I'm concerned with, and it's going to be mainly across Wisconsin and Michigan. The low is going to set itself up right around Iowa, or not Iowa, but Illinois and Indiana. And it's going to be on that northwest side here where we could get some wraparound moisture and start to get some snow. With these temperatures already in place here towards the upper 20s and low 30s, there's a chance that we could get some moderate to heavy snow, and this will also stick pretty well. But just as quickly as it falls down, it's going to warm back up, and we're going to end up seeing this melt. And then, of course, we have to watch for an additional system that will be coming in Friday, which may cause an additional wintry event. So that being said, let's go ahead and take one more look at the Cape values, because that's a big topic here. We aren't even in range of the short range models, but we've seen quite the uptick with that. And this is jumping back, of course, to severe weather. I'm doing this video on the fly, just try to make sure that I'm doing this in somewhat of a timely manner for you guys. I know that I was late on this one, and I do apologize. But this is what we have now as we're heading into Tuesday night, Wednesday. Before, we weren't even seeing 700 joules per kilogram in a lot of regions. Now we have a small pocket here where we're getting up to above 1,000, maybe even 1,200 joules per kilogram. And let's go ahead and click the sounding here and see what we have. Mainly looking at, of course, severe. This is looking like a linear type event. This storm is most likely going to be forming on the line. Not an impressive hordeograph curve here, but there is a decent bit of storm relative helicity there. 127 meters squared per second squared. Something to keep a close eye on there. Cape right there is averaged out at a 903. There is a little bit of a capping inversion there, as we spoke about earlier, but I think we'll be starting to watch that break as we get into the evening and overnight hours with that low-level jet starting to strengthen. So we'll move that forward. The Cape actually starts to increase, and then as we get towards Wednesday afternoon, that's when we start to see things really begin to pick up around Louisiana, especially towards western Louisiana. That's a great area of concern for me. Now, mainly, this looks a little bit on the linear side, but that curve in the hordeograph has gotten more impressive. And we do have a very, not impressive low-level helicity, but it's pretty low to the ground, so that's always something to watch out for, too. Look at the Cape value of that, 1,244. A little bit of an indicator of a classic supercell in the midst of probably what would be a line or cluster of thunderstorms. So we'll have to keep an eye on this as the day progresses on Wednesday. We'll see that move forward and move its way into Missouri. Wow. Mississippi here. We'll see that increased Cape pop up there. Mainly looking more so towards a linear mode, but again, that curve in the hordeograph indicates potential for rotation, so we'll have to keep an eye on that too. Again, helicity isn't super impressive, but there's one there, and there's one pretty low to the ground too, so a quick spin up can't be ruled out. And then as we go towards Thursday, we'll watch that limited amount of Cape, but there still is enough juice there to have to watch southern Georgia and maybe even the panhandle of Florida. We'll have to see how Wednesday and Thursday continue to trend as we progress closer and closer to those days. But for the most part, I'm thinking this is going to be a relatively limited event. Wednesday is the only one that I'm kind of side-eyeing a bit more for, maybe a potential upgrade to a slight risk. But even so, I'm not expecting a huge severe weather day as of right now. Always got to keep it open-ended just in case. Next thing you know, we see an uptrend. We're seeing 2,000 joules per kilogram on Cape, which would be absolutely nuts for this time of year especially. So that being said, let's go ahead and actually take a look at the surface precip here. We're going to start out with Tuesday or Monday night, of course, and we'll roll from there. So we're jumping a little too far ahead here. It's Tuesday morning. Things are relatively quiet at this point. And then it's not until, of course, about 6 p.m. tomorrow where we start to see this line of thunderstorms start to fire off here. This looks like it's over towards the Dallas area. I'm not expecting too much to be going on with that there. But as we drop a little further to the south, say towards Austin, that's where our severe event will start to really kick off. So here's our sounding for that time frame. Not super impressive, very low helicity, and mostly a linear looking mode. And then as we crawl forward with this here, things start to develop a little bit further as we head into Wednesday morning, and then Thursday things look a little bit more widespread. Those are the this has the look of those offshore supercells that I've been talking about here. Circle that area actually real quick. Right around here is the area that I'm going to be watching in particular on Wednesday afternoon. And then as we go into Thursday, try to get that going. This becomes mostly a linear threat. Towards the south side, I think there could be a chance for a brief tornado, if anything. But as we get into Friday morning, the severe threat tapers off a bit, with the exception of maybe the panhandle of Florida over towards Panama City and a few other places over there. But by then, most of the dynamics are already going to be out of the area. Cold front's still lagging back a bit, but that will probably be reaching us just in time for the weekend. Now, as we look back a little bit, it's not really until Wednesday afternoon, again, as I mentioned earlier, where we're keeping an eye on the wintry side of things to start to kick off. It's a little bit of potential here even for a little bit of ice, because there was quite a warming trend going on around this region. The below freezing temperatures are going to be popping up right around here, so wherever the warm and cold air interact here, I'm thinking this is where our battle zone will be. We'll have to watch this for the potential of ice. Good news is this isn't a multi-day event, and it isn't really going too slow here. But one thing to also note here is, like I said, towards this northwestern side of this system where we get that wraparound moisture, the snow could be pretty abundant. It could be pretty heavy at times. So as we move that forward, it's going to be moving through quickly, mainly going to be a big deal, more so towards Wisconsin and maybe the UP and Michigan. But by the time we get towards the end of the weekend, most of that snow's out of here. We're left with a little bit of light snow. Maybe could be some snow banding even as far south as Iowa, maybe even the northern tiers of Missouri. But other than that, I think the worst of it will be over by that point. Of course, towards the weekend, we'll be having to watch yet another system that could be in line for the northwest here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the snowfall totals here. Again, the bullseye, as I mentioned before, is going to be where that heavy snowband constructs. From what the Euro is showing right now, it's going to be mainly around, like I said, the UP and Michigan, where we could see up about 6 to 8 inches. Could be a couple of pockets where we could get above a foot, possibly. I think that's a little bit aggressive, but not unreasonable at this time. We'll have to see what the short range models look like, as we'll be starting to get in the range with those probably tomorrow and Wednesday. We do see a little bit of an area begin to develop around central Iowa here, where we could get up to about 2 to 4 inches according to the Euro. But other than that, snow totals are going to remain pretty light. We already know the deal with these areas over here towards the northwest, towards the Rockies in particular. Mainly the higher elevations are going to be getting snow. There is a small pocket here where we could see up to about an inch for some of these regions towards the northern plains. This isn't anything unheard of for you guys. Over towards the northwest, of course, towards the mountains, pretty solid snowfall totals up to at least 6 inches. A few areas getting above a foot. Towards the far northwest and the higher elevations, we could get some pretty hefty snow there. Couple of spots here could be getting up to 2 to 3 feet up towards Washington and Oregon. But other than that, not too much really going on there. Nothing too far out of the ordinary, I should say. Last thing to look at, of course, is the blend of models as usual. And then the totals on this one are a little bit different, with the exception of the mountains over towards Washington, where we could see up to about 42 inches of snow, which is crazy. But other than that, the totals aren't too deviant. If anything, the totals are a little bit less for this little section here towards the Great Lakes and the northern plains here. We do see a small pocket develop here where we could see about 6 inches of snow, maybe a little bit more. But over towards Iowa, we're mainly going to be struggling to get above an inch. Towards central Wisconsin, we could get up to about 2 to 4 inches possibly. But other than that, it's going to be staying relatively tame. We also have to keep an eye on this part of Maine here where we could get some moderate to heavy snow as that snow belt starts to stretch a little further to the east as it gets into colder air. But other than that, that's really all we got here. But if you found this video useful, by the way, which I hope you did, you know what to do. Click that like button. If you haven't already, do that double click where you hit the like and the subscribe button. Share this to anyone that could be in an area of interest, especially on the severe weather side of things. This could be one of those sneaky type severe weather events. And even if it's not a massive outbreak, if a big storm ends up going through your area and causing a lot of damage, it's going to mean something to you. So don't get caught sleeping on that. Just make sure you're up to date with your weather alerts. Some of these events also look like they could be potentially nocturnal, especially Tuesday night. So if you're over towards Texas, just make sure you're on your P's and Q's and be ready to heed any weather warnings that may be issued. But that being said, that's the end of the video for tonight. I'll have an update video tomorrow afternoon. But until then, this has been Ty, Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you soon. Have a good night.